the documentary.
An unknowing assassin.
Right.
Or something like that. And this is where a lot of conspiracy theories go crazy with Lee Harvey Oswald, with especially with Robert Kennedy's assassin.
Right.
If you look into that, it gets
Sirhan.
Yeah, because their actions afterwards and before, like, really do look like what you would try to do if you could do this. Doesn't implicate necessarily the intelligence agencies. It could be, if it was true, it could have been Soviet. Who knows? But the point is that was the overall point. Could that be done? Whether we could do it, the Soviets could do it, and if it could be done, how would it be done? So there was all kind of there was like everything else within intelligence communities. Most of the work is not done like at Langley. Most of the work is being done out in the world, right? So you have hospitals. You have there was a mental hospital in Canada. There was prisons. There was subcultures is a big thing.
Right.
There's evidence to believe that people like cult leaders, because of a lot of reasons, subcultures and things like that were targeted. To see if could you do this? This is where you get connections with Manson, the Brown, the mass suicide, whatever. People suspect. I'm not saying any of that's true. I'm saying this is why those things are done. Was LSD was the primary drug used for this. So it was a combination of three things that they really, really got hammered or investigated about, and that was the use of LSD, electric shock treatment, and hypnosis. All right. So the idea was. Could you create a split personality? Could you split somebody's, and that was a thing. So they would use things like LSD and electric shock therapy, or it's not really therapy. They would shock somebody to points to where other things, isolation, just a number of things to try to see if you could cause enough trauma to someone to essentially create another personality. And if you could create another personality, if that was possible, could you use that personality? Could you manipulate it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if any of that really happened. I don't know if it was, they claim it was not successful.
Right.
And that it stopped, the project was stopped in, I don't know, the 70s or something. Of course, Richard Helms was not the most transparent of the... I'll tell you a cool thing about that real quick, and I'm going to pass the subject back to you. But if you've ever seen the movie with Matt Damon, I forgot what it was, but it's about the birth of the CIA. It has Robert De Niro in it. He plays, I believe he plays Alan Dulles.
Okay.
And Matt Damon is just an unknown. I don't think he's a real person.
Right.
But everyone around him is real.
Right.
He goes to Yale. Right. He's the Skull and Bones, the whole mythology stuff.
Right.
And he's tapped to be Skull and Bones. And of course, that he used to be a very happy person. He was involved in theater. He's just a real
outgoing.
Extra, yeah. And then in the show, he's tapped for Skull and Bones. And then whenever he enters Skull and Bones, this would be the era that the Bushes and Kerry and everybody was it had been around that time frame. This was before the Cuban Missile Crisis and all that kind of stuff, right? So. He's tapped in Skull and Bones. CIA didn't exist at the time, I don't think. I think at the beginning of the movie it was OSS, yeah. He's tapped in Skull and Bones, and when he gets in there, he is immediately basically sworn to secrecy and extorted right off the bat. They force him to do things that that only the brothers know about, and that type of deal, right? And then it goes on. It shows his career in the CIA. It shows how his marriage is secret. If I had to pick a theme of the movie, and I'm sure it's got multiples, I would say it's the danger of secrecy. Okay. That it destroys your soul, especially when you're talking about your family, your wife. It destroys his relationship. He ends up at the end doing horrible things. Like he's so dead. He's so numb. Right. He has his girlfriend. He has his son's fiance thrown out of a plane because he suspects she might be a Russian infiltrator. Right. And she's not. Right. His son loved her. His son was just like him. He was very, he broke his son's heart, killed his. A lot of things end up, happening. But at the very end of the movie, it's really dark. At the end of the movie, this guy who he went through Skull and Bones with, who he worked with CIA, ends up taking over the CIA, and the character is Richard Helms. Okay. I don't think that this movie is very accurate at all. Okay, right. But there's certain things that I think kind of they nailed. Yeah. At the end of the movie, they're walking down the hallway, And Richard Helms is basically telling him, everything you've done is going to be classified, or we're going to do this, we're going to do that, yada, yada. I've got to go to a... And he's kind of like, even though this guy's career compared to Richard Helms' career hasn't been nearly successful.
Right.
Richard Helms has moved all the way to the top, and this has kind of been the guy that's took the brunt of the damage.
Right.
But, it's kind of a pat on the back, thanks for being a company guy.
Yeah.
And then as Richard Helms walks away, it's brilliant. He turns around and says... He's something about they're demanding answers. The Senate Arms Committee or the Intelligence Committee is demanding answers.
Right.
And he says, as if I'm going to give them answers. And then, Matt Damon kind of like, And then he walks a little bit more. He turns back around. He said, someone asked me a question once. Why do we call it CIA instead of the CIA?
Right.
And I answered them, you don't say the God.
Right.
And that was... Okay, so that's the kind of the attitude, and that time frame, that's who you're talking about. So there's a lot of stuff that happened, for better or worse. But those programs, and the argument is, when you look at the entertainment industry, and you look at subcultures and things like that, is that they are either the residents or the resident. I don't know what I'm trying to say. The residue. Mm-hmm. Of these programs that they took off a life of their own, that the CIA infiltrated the subculture, put these things into motion, let it go, and then never got control of it again.
Right.
With the LSD, the drugs, or it's still going on, and I think the kind of the idea behind this is that there's a cult involvement that's coming all the way back from the Nazi Germany day that has infiltrated our entertainment industry and culture, and it's just living.
Yeah.
And it's creating this right now. And
well, two cases in point that would go in different ways toward what you're kind of talking about is one, do these programs exist? Absolutely they do. Two, just take a look at the assassination recently of who's the dictator of North Korea?
I can't say his name, man. Kim Jong, whatever.
Yeah. So he just killed his brother. And how did he do it? His brother has been estranged from North Korea for many, many years.
Yeah.
Has been essentially living in hiding. In some place like Taiwan or Singapore or someplace in the Pacific Rim,
Yeah.
And the way they got him was by convincing two women that they were going to be on a reality show that pulled pranks on people, and their instructions were to, we're going to identify a guy, he's on the show, and you're going to run up and you're going to spray something in his face. And I've seen the tape of it.
Wow.
And they do it to him in an airport, and then the security cameras, you can see him, he starts to stagger, and then he presents himself at a station.
They killed him unknowingly? They didn't even know that they were doing...
They didn't even know. That's the story that's out.
Wow. I believe that.
So I do too.
Yeah.
And so
unknowing assassins.
They completely unwitting. They thought they were on a reality TV show, and they were taping a segment, and they had instructions to do what they did, and they did it, and 45 minutes later, he's dead.
Yeah.
And it's from ricin poisoning or one of those agents, right? So that's one, Yeah. And look, how simple is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's ideal.
People are so desperate to be celebrities that reality TV is a thing.
Yeah.
I remember watching reality TV when it first came out, and I honestly, I didn't think it was going to last.
I couldn't understand why.
Yeah. And then,
it's been around for over 20 years now.
And it's either Fear Factor or one of those early ones, where they were like...
Survivor was kind of the... Survivor and American Idol kind of like pushed it.
And then this other one, it didn't last very long, came out, and they were trying to get... it was like, what can we get you... What can we give you to eat what we... will you eat worms? Will you eat this? Will you eat that?
Yeah.
And then at one point, they're like, what would you eat? Human flesh. This is human flesh. And like two of them did.
Actual human flesh?
No, it wasn't really human flesh, but the point was they illustrated...
Did they... Are you sure it wasn't?
Exactly.
They thought it wasn't, but it was human flesh.
So that was one case, where you have the unwitting assassins.
Right.
I forgot the second case that I wanted to point to because... Ted Kaczynski.
Okay.
So apparently, the guy was a genius, and he went to Yale or Harvard, I think Harvard. He was in mathematics, And his freshman year, and your description of the Matt Damon character sounded just like Ted Kaczynski to me.
Okay.
You know, he went out there. There had always been something a little bit odd about him. Probably he might have been on the autism spectrum, but he also was a genius. And he goes out to college, and he signs up to get paid to participate in a psychological study. Which I remember when I was at the University of Missouri, they would post flyers on that. We'll pay you if you'll come down and do this sleep study, or you'll do this, you'll do that. So you sign all the paperwork that says, I'm willing to do whatever you do. And this particular study had to do with his speaking with another individual who was an upperclassman or a graduate student, right?
Right.
About his own theories about X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
The instructions for the other guy was just to belittle and make him feel like an idiot, to see at what level he would break down and abandon his ideas or how he would respond. His brother is convinced to this day that that was like the turning point in his life.
Really?
That it explains everything about the rest of his life.
Wow.
And he did speak to his brother before his brother went off and lived in the middle of the woods, backwoods, wherever his cabin was, right? And there's a documentary on Netflix that I recommend highly to you on Ted Kaczynski. I hadn't really looked into him. Very well done. But his brother to this day is... So it made me wonder, apparently the guy that was doing that psychological experiment, the professor, is somebody that was doing it on behest of the government. He had like government grants to do it.
Yeah.
And there were military ties with the things that he was trying to find out.
100, yeah.
And so there you have a case where it's like, all right, that didn't work, right?
Right, yeah.
But then you ended up creating a guy that ended up being Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah.
Who for the next 25 years is assassinating different people, either in revenge for the way he was treated or because his psyche got warped enough to where...
Yes.
And here's the thing, the way conspiracy theories work. Conspiracy theories operate in a kind of a double language, to bring it back to Pizzagate, that is very, very similar to the language of a paranoid schizophrenic. You know, there's that old saying, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't really after you.
Right.
But the other thing is I got to hear in my psych class at Mizzou a tape recording of an interview with a paranoid schizophrenic who also had delusions of grandeur. And he began by making the argument that he was going to prove that he was directly related to Christ. This is before the Da Vinci Code.
Oh.
Okay.
I think I remember something about this.
And then he, as he's talking, his logic jumped a groove, and he ended up proving that he was directly related to Adam. And he never noticed that he'd skipped a groove.
Okay.
But if you were attuned, our psych professor said, if you listen, you'll hear the place where he jumps the shark, as it were, in his argument, but he never even notices that he does. And I think that's very interesting when we talk about the vocabulary of pedophiles or child trafficking, right?
Right.
So one of the ways that you would mask one of these things is to actually exploit what's already out there to make the whole thing look completely ridiculous. In the movie The Mancharian Candidate, and by the way, if you guys have not seen it, I recommend. There's a remake with Denzel Washington, quite good.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. Yeah.
But when I saw it, I thought, why would you remake this film? Because you can't do better than the original, which stars Frank Sinatra. Mm-hmm. Frank Sinatra is not the Manchurian Candidate, but that's about North Koreans, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
Capturing a whole platoon.
Yeah.
And then brainwashing them. And some of the techniques that Frankenheimer, the director, uses in 1962 when they made the film are brilliant. They're so simple. They show a scene with all of the platoons sitting very, very bored on a stage while a woman with flowers on her bodice and a bonnet is lecturing about orchids or flowers to a whole room full of women. But what Frankenheimer does is he pans the crowd of all these women, and it looks very incongruous that you've got these American soldiers in their fatigues sitting up there just kind of like not paying attention to what she's saying on the stage before them. The camera sweeps around 360, and when it comes back around to the lady that's talking, she is this North Korean military general.
Okay.
And the camera keeps going around, and when they come back around to the crowd, it's an amphitheater filled with Soviet scientists, military personnel, Koreans, Chinese, all of our enemies in the Cold War.
Right.
And he's not explaining anything about flowers at all. He's explaining about brainwashing. And then he asks the Mancharian candidate, who among all of the platoon, who do you guys think is your favorite? And he says, I think it's I think it's this guy. Mm-hmm. Why is he your favorite? Well, he's just so innocent. We feel very protective of him.
Right.
He's like, would you please take this scarf? And he takes the scarf, and he goes, now go stand behind him. And he stands behind him, and then he says, now strangle him to death. And, he just does it.
How scary was that when that came out?
Right. And, what's interesting, speaking of the JFK assassination, is that this is a little bit of movie trivia. They didn't release the film because the JFK assassination happened, and the studio decided this is too incendiary to release now.
Yeah.
So the film got delayed for several years.
You know what that really was?
Yeah.
Some dude in this... this is a joke. This is a joke, okay? Disclaimer.
Whoa.
Oh, shit, man. We were supposed to kill him after, 2 years after,
Yeah, we goofed it up.
Yeah.
So...
that's a joke.
But in the film, I recommend it highly because the mechanism by which they turn him on and off is with a deck of cards.
Yes.
Anonymous phone call comes, wouldn't you like to play a game of solitaire? He starts playing solitaire, and then as soon as he sees the Queen of Hearts or Queen of Diamonds, that's his trigger, and he does whatever he was programmed to do. And then has no memory of it at all.
Right.
But the big question, too, going back to Out of Shadows, what are the connections between LSD, sex trafficking, government secret programs to manipulate? Well, I always want to ask the big questions, right? And the big question with this, okay, I understand why we would want to know what our enemies were doing and see how they were doing it and see if it was possible.
Yeah.
Just like with viruses in a lab.
Yeah.
You're going to look for a cure, but you're also going to look
for a weapon.
How to weaponize it, right?
Yep.
But let's take a look at the two big ways that power factions win. Like, what are the modes of warfare that we have available to us as human beings? Well, there's only two. There's physical force.
Yep.
And there is psychological, or if you want to give the appropriate term, spiritual manipulation.
Right.
So LSD is at the nexus of those two things, right?
What do you mean?
It's a drug that you take into your body that alters your psyche.
Right, okay.
Right?
Yep.
But it leaves your body intact. Never been a death of an overdose on LSD documented in the history of medicine.
Really?
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
I just watched
Unless they killed themselves because
as an ancillary
not
thing.
like it, yeah, not, yeah.
But nobody's ever overdosed on LSD. In fact, a woman was convicted of murdering her husband, saw this on Forensic Files, where she claimed that she had poisoned him with LSD or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I found that out. And they consulted with some medical people. They're like, no, you can't overdose on LSD. That's not possible. Turned out it was arsenic. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
But the rumor had been that she had spiked his Jello or something with LSD or whatever, his ice cream.
Okay.
So LSD would become a prime target for government experimentation.
Well, I believe that. Isn't the accusation it was created?
Yeah.
I don't know that. But everything I've said, people claim that it was, something created by the Nazis or by us.
So if your two modes of warfare are, so what do you do in warfare, right? Using, say, World War II as your example. If you're Nazi Germany and you want to take over Europe, and you invade Poland, well then the first, and you physically invade the place, right?
Yeah.
Then the first targets are going to be the head of the snake.
Right.
Which are going to be government officials and the people who are handling the levers of power in Poland.
And that's always the fear when something assassination attempt happens. Is this the beginning?
Is this the beginning,
operation,
right? Yeah. Of an operation that is much bigger than this.
Yep.
And then the second set of people that you've got to get rid of are the intelligentsia, the professors, because we're the ones that poison the minds of the next generation to tell them you shouldn't be listening to Nazi propaganda, because that's not the truth. And the third set you always go after is the church, because the church has this huge influence over the way people behave.
But in modern times...
what do you replace it with?
So now, and I've always said this, I said it's interesting to me. Someone said one time they were watching a concert. I can't remember who it was. It's a huge concert. It was somebody, one of the artists was accused of occultic stuff, And it was, I think the first time it was brought up to me, somebody said, what do you think about that? And I said, doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
And they're like, why? I said, well, I mean, if you look at obviously, we're Catholics, but if you look at a big evangelical church, and you see, essentially, I don't want to offend anybody, but it looks like it's a big performance, right? It's a worship service.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, so if that's good, if that's Christian and that's good, I said, what I'm seeing over here is the opposite. It's a secular worship service.
Yeah.
Okay, you see what I'm saying? This person is an influencer.
Yeah.
It's so it's like the opposite. And without even getting spiritual, I'm just saying, like, if you look at it on any version, if I want to change people's minds in a secular country, essentially a secular country,
right,
with people who are getting further and further away from the church in every capacity,
right.
What are they all moving towards, or what has always been there?
Right.
Entertainment industry.
Right.
All right. Musicians, especially. So that's their church.
Yeah. No. I mean, I stopped watching the Oscars several years ago.
I'm answering your question though. That's who you would.
The last Oscars program I watched, the award ceremony, right?
Yeah.
I ended up walking away from it disgusted because it was a religious ceremony, honoring the gods of the industry. I mean, it looked like a church. Like the way they had the set dressed and everything like that, I was like, wow. When Barack Obama had one of his biggest rally,s the way they dressed up the stage, I'm not saying this was related necessarily, again, looked like a Greek pagan, temple.
Yeah.
And it was like the god had strode, onto the world stage, at that moment. And I was like, wow, are they
we're worshiping our gods. These are our demigods. These are demigods. Performers, politicians. It looks to me like, honestly, this is America's new religion.
Yeah. Or at least a portion of America's new religion.
I would say, whatever the cultures, obviously there's a Christian, Judeo-Christian, whatever portion of this country.
Right.
The opposite of that would be the other church, which I would say is the secular atheist, and their church is the church of entertainment, and their sacraments are all those things that are abortion for it seems anyway. I thought I was answering your question, but I'm not sure.
In a way you are, because I think that becomes the big question. The question is why, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, if you answer the question in terms of international politics and the competition between traditional enemies, you know what I mean, for world domination, is that where it stops? Do you see what I mean? Is that really the reason why, or is there another reason that goes beyond that? What's the purpose and
what's the end game?
What's the end game, right? And so I'm writing notes last night watching Out of Shadows, because Out of Shadows is pretty thin on. Out of Shadows doesn't make any direct accusations against any Hollywood figures.
No,
right? Did you notice that?
Not only did I notice that, I noticed that he doesn't have any direct involvement with it. This is what he thinks.
Exactly.
Based on his research.
Right.
This is not, and he's not a whistleblower.
Somewhat on his experience. Right. He's not like Corey Feldman saying, I'm going to name names of people that I know definitively have done these things.
Right.
He's looking at it in a much bigger picture way.
He's saying that my experience in the culture, it's like when I took the red pill, all of a sudden this stuff starts to make way more sense.
Exactly. And he woke up.
But I didn't see any of it because I would kill somebody.
He woke up because he said, wait, this is programming. We're gently, he mentioned, what was it called? MK Ultra.
Yeah.
And then they showed scenes from Zoolander where they're mentioning MK Ultra as a plot point in Zoolander.
Right.
Right? Well, what better...
I've never even seen that. I got to go and watch that movie.
Yeah. But the thing is, what better way, right?
Yeah.
To soften up your audience for the idea that these things are absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And hoaxes and fake news and conspiracy theories that have been debunked than to ridicule them in a comic movie that ends up being hugely popular.
And you say that, and I've said this before. The problem, the reason why the left seems to be winning a lot of the arguments is because they got all the comedians on their side.
Yeah.
Honestly, I said, instead of arguing, because apparently content doesn't matter, okay? Like, arguments don't matter anymore. Logic doesn't matter anymore. So if we want to win, we should just start making fun of everyone. That's why I say, like, just start calling, they call us racist. It's funny. It's yada yada.
Right.
This person's this. Go to your Klan meeting. We'll just start calling them pedophiles all the time. It's a joke, guys. It's just a joke.
Yeah.
But I'm saying until we, it's like you get made fun of. Well, apparently that's it. And the tragic thing about that is at what point is nothing serious?
Right. And, well, I mean, would that be part of the end game?
I mean,
Right.
you know, because that's where you end up. The only way I can get in is if I just make fun of you guys the way you make fun of me.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now everyone makes fun of each other, and we're just a bunch of clowns. And America, we just become idiots.
Well, and what's interesting about this too is that, and we've never been successful in doing it. Every time we try. But to go back a little bit, you know, you can either take over the world physically or you can do it spiritually. Ultimately, you're going to have to do both if you want to run it. Right. So the experience that we watched in the 20th century of the socialist, fascist, communist way of the physical takeover
Didn't work.
It didn't work because it required just
Too much
whole-scale destruction of basic humanity. I used to ask my students this: you know, if you're going to take over a country, who are the people that you're going to keep around, and who are the people you're going to get rid of? And my students would always say the same thing. Well, you get rid of the dumb people. I'm like, nope, those are the ones you want. You got to get rid of the smart people.
Yeah.
One, there are fewer of those in the population, and two, they're the most dangerous to you. Mm-hmm. Right? Anybody that can ferret out what the actual truth is. So going back to even early on in this conversation, we were talking about, you know, when I'm looking up Pizzagate and all I can find is that the whole thing is a hoax. I'm not even finding links to people who believe in it.
That's disturbing.
That disturbs me a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
Where's the other side of this argument?
Where did it go? It's gone.
Yeah. You can't.
And then when you tell me...
You can't get rid of the JFK conspiracy theories,
right,
the moon landers, and the flat earthers. If I go to flat earth, I find arguments, right, on both sides.
Yeah.
Even though they're ridiculous on the flat earth side.
Right.
But I can't find anything online saying that Pizzagate